Good evening, everyone. This is the Historic Environmental Board Preservation Board meeting. The date is I'm sorry, Thursday, November 22nd. It is 6:14. Madam Clerk, roll call.
Good evening. Board Member Robert Smith. Board Member Frances Dolly McIntyre. Board Member Maritza Hernandez.
Here, present.
Welcome.
Thank
New board member. Board Member Zamar Brown.
Here.
Board Member Romer Ferguson. Board Member Merrick Williams. Vice Chair Alex Van Meckel.
Present.
Chairwoman Makisha Fenn. Attendance confirmed.
Thank you very much. And at this time, if we could have a moment of silence. And now the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, we're proceeding on to any add-on items. Madam Clerk, staff, do we have add-on items this evening?
No, we do not.
Thank you. And moving on to approval of minutes. This is approval of minutes of our board meeting from July 30th, 2024.
I move approval.
Moved by Board Member McIntyre. I need a second.
Second.
Second by Board Member Brown. Madam Clerk, roll call.
Board Member McIntyre.
Yes.
Board Member Hernandez.
Yes.
Board Member Brown.
Yes.
Vice Chair Van Meckel.
Yes.
Minutes approved.
Thank you. Proceeding to public comments for agenda items only. Do we have anyone here for anything on the agenda or virtual that we know of?
We have no one for virtual. And based on the people present in the audience, I don't think we have anyone to speak for public comments.
Wonderful. Thank you. All right. Without further ado, we'll proceed to resolutions. Madam Attorney.
Resolution number one, thank you. A resolution of the City Commission of the City of Opa-locka, Florida, approving the recommendation of the Historic Environmental Preservation Board to issue a certificate of appropriateness for the structure at 1141 Jan Avenue to conduct full roof replacement on the registered historic property, providing for an effective date.
Can I get a motion for discussion?
Our motion to discuss.
Can I get a second?
Second.
Great. All right. This is in the house in question, 1141 Jan, the Haslip House. This is for a roof replacement. Staff, do we have any comments on this permit?
Gregory Gay, Director of Planning and Community Development. We do have a presentation by Mr. Gerald Lee in relationship to this particular property. As we have discussed in the past, we are looking to modify our process. Since this is for a roof replacement and it's a flat roof, which is virtually not visible from the public right of way, this would, when we get our legislation in properly, will fall under a regular certificate of appropriateness, which hopefully would be done through an administrative process versus the process we're going through now. Mr. Lee is here to basically give a brief presentation on what is being done with this particular property. If you have any questions, we'll address.
Gerald Lee, Planning and Community Development Department zoning official. Next slide, please. As Mr. Gay has indicated, this is a simple move. Next slide, please. This is a simple request for a certificate of appropriateness for a roof. In the future, we expect that this kind of thing will be handled administratively and the information about it will be brought to this board. At this time, it's not in that particular position, so we have to go through what we're going through. I just wanted to give an indication of the location of the property. I think everyone is aware of where it is. Next slide, please. That's what it looks like from the outside. And this is only for a roof, and it's a flat roof. And as Mr. Gay has indicated, there are no parapets or anything else that gives any vision of the roofing material or anything else because it is flat and it can't be seen from the street right of way. Next slide, please. This was just a historic drawing that was in the files that we located. And I just wanted to bring that out that for the most part, it's pretty much exactly like it was when they built it in 1926, except for the dome that's not there now. Next slide, please. This COA is just for a roof replacement. Next slide, please. Staff is recommending approval.
Board members?
So when I saw the picture, can we go back to the picture? Is that a finial that I see on the left-hand side? That's sticking up?
Minaret.
Mayor,
Right. So my question is, obviously, I know we're gonna approve the roofing, which isn't an issue, but are they doing anything to waterproof the minaret? Are they doing anything to make sure that that is being, how do I say this? Preserved as it relates to water intrusion and or any type of deterioration?
That's a good question, sir. What was in the permit and in the plans was only to take care of the flat roof.
So,
That's what was indicated.
got it. Can we make a recommendation or give a recommendation that the minaret is make sure that they either waterproof or do some type of preservation of the minaret? Because the thing is, it's one thing, obviously, we know we have to deal with the horizontal surface, but that typically becomes one of the opportunity for water intrusion and or an opportunity for it to get deteriorated if it's not preserved.
Thank you very much, sir. We appreciate that. We'll have that added as a condition.
Thank you.
Board members, any additional comments? No? I have one. The minaret here already addressed, but the one in particular, just from my own experience in getting a re-roof, and it's the same more or less approach in terms of a flat surface. I did not expect that the new code requires a secondary scupper access for emergency like water to escape the roof line, even if there's a pitch to that roof line. Uniquely for this house, and unlike most historic homes in Opa-locka, it still has the original scuppers on the house. So I would expect that there is sensitivity to wanting to maintain and preserve that feature over time. And because of roofing jobs in the past, those scuppers have either been purposefully eliminated or accidentally. And I don't know if these are functional, at least in the way it is today. It was back then. I don't believe, if I'm not mistaken, Mr. Lee, is there any indication as to where the scuppers would be placed? Because I assume they would have to follow the same code in getting another secondary scupper and like basically broken through the wall, an overflow.
We can make this as a comment, but as I indicated before, with Mr. Brown's comment, the permit only talked about replacement of the roof itself, and this can be something else that we can add as a condition for them to consider better waterproofing and prevention of any decay.
Okay. Yeah, because I know that just one and the same with a re-roof, they'll address by code and to clear their permit, having that secondary access in case they don't already have that. I just, following the work, I don't want to see these scuppers lost because there's no need for them to. So that would be my only additional comment. Can I get a motion to approve?
Mr. Chair.
Oh,
do-
yes.
Do you want to add the two conditions as a part of your approval? So
Yes.
if so, we need to state that on the record.
Okay, so we need a motion to add these two recommendations to the
As
review
conditions.
As
as
conditions.
conditions. Yes, okay. Can I get a motion to add the two conditions of preserving and waterproofing the minaret and maintaining the original scuppers of the house in its current form? Moved by Board Member McIntyre. I need a second.
Second.
Second by Board Member Brown. Madam Clerk, roll call.
Board Member McIntyre?
Yes.
Board Member Hernandez?
Yes.
Board Member Brown?
Yes.
Vice Chairman Bangle?
Yes.
Approved.
Thank you very much. And thank you for the presentation. The visual, the layout is superb. It's exactly what we've been hoping for, and we're very thankful. So thank you for including that as part of the larger packet here. All right, Madam Attorney, the second resolution.
Yes, a resolution of the City Commission of the City of Opa-locka, Florida, approving the recommendation of the Historic Environmental Preservation Board to issue a certificate of appropriateness for the structure at 1111 Sesame Street to conduct partial demolition and an addition to this registered historic property, providing for an effective date.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
before you move on this particular item, we did go through the application and there was some information that was not included within your package when it was provided to you. We do have the complete set of plans that is showing some of the modifications, but the information that has been provided is not in its total state. So therefore, we would like to defer this particular item until our next Historic Preservation Board, which most likely will take place sometime in January.
Okay. Do we need a motion to defer that, or are we just proceeding with the
I would
defer?
still ask, yes.
Okay. Question, board member?
So as it relates to, and that's when I see the package, I see like a kind of a preliminary floor plan. But in the drawings, did they provide elevations and additional information?
Some of that information was provided, but it wasn't included in your package. And I think that it's only fair that you receive everything that's associated with the package.
Okay.
Therefore, that's the reason we wanted to defer the item.
Okay, not a problem.
Yeah. Just for the Mr. Lee. Just for the record, I have concerns about this. Just the wording of partial demolition in regards to the current condition of the structure overall, which is not just compromised, but it doesn't have a roof on it. So I'm hoping that in addition to whatever is needed in terms of addressing a partial demolition, that there's also a larger conversation about restoration of the full structure and not a partial addition being made, because the house at present is uninhabitable. So do we have any additional comments before we get a motion for deferment?
So I do. With regards to the way that the addition is shown, like typically when you're tying an existing building into a new building or historical building, you try to kind of offset the addition. In other words, you don't want one to blend into the other one. So rather, when I look at the addition and look at the area that is tying into the building, it's almost like they have completely aligned with that particular existing structure. So in order to kind of distinguish between the two, I would like to see some like an offset in the wall, rather if it's either 8 inches, 12 inches, so that you can distinguish this completely, and it's bold, this is original, this is proposed, addition.
I think as part of the plans, and that's where there's misinformation. Their initial proposal was to do a partial demolition to and actually replace a portion of the structure that they felt was most likely deteriorated to the point where it needed to be replaced. And I think in terms of the addition, they're actually adding back what is going to be demolished. So it's going to be a 1-for-1. That's why we want to provide you with more accurate documentation. Therefore, you can have a more accurate assessment and then make a proper choice. So that's the movement for deferment.
Works for me.
Do we have a guarantee that what would become as the end product in the permit that's issued to them, that it is in fact partial and not complete of the demolition? Because it's interesting to me that this is being pursued for the back half of the structure, whereas more or less the first half needs a complete reconstruction, short of saving, in this case, the 3 walls that are facing the street of Sesame. So that's my biggest concern, just in terms of what the intent here is, because it seems kind of backwards to what you would think to do and just fully rehabilitating or restoring an entire property, as opposed to just singling out the back portion of it, since it's all of the same material and it all has the same roof line that's collapsed.
Through our assessment, we're somewhat in agreement with you, and we want to be able to go back to the property owner and ask them those particular questions.
Sure.
Along with the documentation that they presented to us thus far, to make sure that it's not just fixing the back and not taking in consideration the facade that is from the public point of view. So we want to be able to take that back and make sure that when we do provide all the full documentation, that it's actually what they are intending to do.
And is there a concession that can be made if they're granted this, that they have to pursue the restoration of the front portion?
They may include that as a part of their overall presentation. So the application may change.
Okay. Okay. I appreciate you entertaining the questions. Can I get a motion for deferment?
Motion to defer.
Second by
Second.
Board Member Brown. The item has been deferred. Madam Attorney, Resolution 3,
Okay.
third resolution.
A resolution of the City Commission of the City of Opa-locka, Florida, approving the recommendation of the Historic Environmental Preservation Board to issue a certificate of appropriateness for the structure at 1301 Sherrar Avenue for the replacement of 10 windows and 2 doors to this registered historic property, providing for an effective date.
All right. Mr. Lee, I believe you have a beautiful presentation for this property as well.
Yes. This is a simple request to replace windows and doors on this historic property. Next slide, please. This is the location. This place is very near 27th Avenue. To your east side, to the right is 27th Avenue, and it is sitting on Sherrar. Yeah, on Sherrar Avenue, and that is the location of the house. Next slide, please. This is the presentation of the looks of the place, and they want to replace 1-for-1 the windows and the doors within the requirements for historic properties. Next slide, please. The certificate of appropriateness is just to replace the windows and doors, nothing else, no roof, no additions, no changes of that sort. Next slide, please. And we recommend approval for such. This would also, Mr. Gay, correct me if you see it differently. this would also be one of the items that would be administratively done when the legislation is adopted.
Potentially.
Mhm.
Board members, any comments?
Before I comment, do we need to make a motion to comment? Okay. So obviously I see the NOAs that they've provided in the package. I see the building, but my thing is, how do we end up seeing or understanding what the current windows is or the original windows? Do we have any photographs of the building back in 1920s, 30s, 50s, something to kind of show the original design intent is my first question. So that we can then look and see what's being proposed as far as the windows and the proportion of the windows, the way that they're being proposed. Because right now I'm seeing just an application, a NOA, and a photo.
Mhm.
I can't determine, was it 3 panels, 2 panels, etc. Are we going from jalousie to fixed? I don't know.
The product information is probably the only indication that I've seen in the package of what they intend to install. I did not find a depiction of the type of windows beyond a picture like this of what kind of windows are there. I didn't find a historic picture of the windows. I went through the data that Mr. Mickle provided, see if there was something in those files, and I didn't find it, even in the link. In fact, I don't think there was a link for this one in particular on the spreadsheet. Because that's what I was looking for, something historic that would give me more bite on what would be required. So I didn't find that. And so I'm depending on the product information as a picture of what they will be installing.
Yeah, I'll second that comment. In my research, there's no rendering, there's no elevation drawings for this house or original photo that predates the 1950s, and even then it's difficult in that example from a building jacket from the county as to what the doors and windows to this house looks like. Personally, if it's a 1-for-1 change for what it currently is, it's unsubstantial to me. I'm more interested in them just maintaining the porch room on the front of that house. And even if it's possible, perhaps this would be a different pursuit for them to want, let alone a permit. But there is a noticeable impression on the furthest left side of that house that used to be the carport. And I know that part of our objective with regards to our historic properties is to, over time, incrementally make changes that bring it back to its character. In this case, it would be a rounded arch that, again, is very noticeable on that property. So that's not me saying that I'm interested in holding this process up, but if it's possible for us to provide a strong recommendation to the current owner that is examined, obviously it's more involved than just swapping it out because there's a door there and you're talking potentially about a window form. That would be the one thing that I would like to come out of us voting on this, if you're able to shepherd this information to the owner, because there's no guesswork to what that shape looks like. It quite literally was an outdoor space. So if in lieu of there being accurate information about window shape and style, including doors, general openings, then that would be a specific opening that would return a character to this house that we have evidence of.
Are they replacing all the windows in the house?
The count was 10 on the permit.
Understandable, but what happened is, as I look at the floor plan, and again, the floor plan is kind of difficult to read, but I'm seeing windows that are in the back of the house that has a key to it in other areas, but my concern is we're seeing an application for only fixed windows. So are we saying that in bedrooms are going to be a fixed window, so there's no emergency egress, there's no opportunity for ventilation? So I have question as far as the validity of just changing out windows for like. It could be like for like, but are we doing opportunity for the ventilation? Because none of the inner ways call out for an operable window. It's just a fixed window and a masonite door. And a masonite door is not traditionally a historical door. So I'm a bit kind of unintuned at this point for what's being proposed.
May I make a suggestion? Um, and it's kind of like in sync with what you're gesturing toward. We know the time period of when this structure was built, and based on the time
Windows
period,
consideration.
there was a certain type of window styles that are associated with that time period. If the board would like to suggest that we make a recommendation that the time period be taken in consideration as to the replacement styles for the windows, that we can move in that particular direction. And Vice Chair Van Meckel, um, as it relates to the opening where there used to be a carport, I have seen in other locations where there have been some modifications to a property where the garage still looked like a garage from the exterior. Interior wise, it functioned differently. And they made some modifications where there would presumably be a garage door. They still had a single door entry, but it was just more or less done in the design of the door frame itself. That might be something that you want to proffer, and we can take that back to the property owner and say, hey, these are some of the concerns that the board has, and maybe make those as some type of conditions in order for this application to be approved.
Board member, any?
So in the effort to move it forward, I don't have a problem with putting in some conditions. So do you want me to start to kind of list some of those conditions?
Yeah, that would be helpful. I think you have a knowledge base that's useful for this item.
So as it relates to any windows that are being replaced that are in bedrooms or living areas, they need to be operable to allow for ventilation and or as an emergency egress. So that would be number one, especially in bedrooms. That's a Florida building code requirement.
Yes, it is. I was just going to say that.
Let me know when you're ready, Mr. Lee.
So you said, in bedrooms and living rooms, it has to be an active,
Operable
operable window.
window. And windows in bedrooms have to have a minimum opening for emergency egress.
Okay, and that will be something that will be enforced by the building official anyway. So,
Should be, yes.
yeah. Okay, but go ahead.
You ready for them? We ready for the second one?
Yes, sir.
So, as it relates to the fixed windows, typically when you look at historical windows in the era that this particular structure was built, it was prior to air conditioning, so therefore it basically had natural ventilation. With that in mind, putting fixed windows compared to where typically may have been jalousie windows. Again, I don't know. I'm guessing here. But the question is, I'm just highly recommending that they consider ventilation in as best as possible in this particular building, in the structure.
So you're saying instead of fixed windows, they should
Consider,
consider ventilation windows?
yes. Now, if it's a decorative window or something like that, that's fixed, or a unique shape window, not a problem.
Okay, third condition? Or is that it?
So as it relates to the masonite door, the masonite door is your tradition, your typical plain Jane door. Has no architectural significance or anything. So do we recommend, and I'm getting chiming because again, I could be an architect or I can just be a kind of like a community liaison. So the question is, do I be an architect and say, hey, this isn't architecturally pleasing and does not meet historical character? Or is there a meet in the middle suggestion that you all will have?
I think that's a larger question for us in regards to any permit that we're reviewing, because this comes up all the time in terms of us asking what the windows look like, what the doors look like, and yet those are undoubtedly the character defining access points to a home and its style. I'm in complete agreement with you about there not being something appropriate about whatever the Masonite style is of choice, and it's hard to say what that is. I can say that this is the last time I'm going to be inclined to vote yes on anything and make concessions, because I think we need to start setting a standard for a minimum standard that is not cost prohibitive, simply in choosing a finish of an exterior door that faces the street, that enhances the appearance of the house in relation to even the windows that are chosen. And we don't need to get into even the finish of the windows being of a certain type, color. You know, that's a concession I can make so long as the form and the shape of it is the same. But doors in particular, run the numbers. They're not, you know, for something impact, non-impact, a white door versus a wood finish door, there's a very little cost difference. So, you know,
I think I have a recommendation.
yeah.
So as it relates to the 6-panel door that they're showing, this Masonite 6-panel door, we would like to either see a single panel door or a flush door versus the 1980s 6-panel Masonite panel door. That's really not in the era in which this building was built.
Is it a single panel or?
A single panel door
I,
versus the 6-panel that's showing.
I would suggest a single panel, because
Single
that might be more in sync with the time period.
So a single panel door
Okay.
versus and in other words, currently they're showing in the NOA the 6-panel door.
Mhm.
We're saying that make it a single full panel door.
Okay.
That may be the easier solution that they can get through Masonite, I believe. I'm pretty much sure Masonite sells it.
I have your condition.
Thank you.
Is it, you know, I'll add to this as the larger conversation and what I will not want to make concessions on here on. Is there something that we can do from the building and permitting perspective of having a permit application that granularly, for historic properties only, granularly details what the expectation is in regards to examining this for your historic property, considerate of the period, them doing their research to be able to know what that is, or using staff as a resource to help guide that process? Because without knowing these answers, it's really hard to get enthused about the end product, especially when it's going to be a lasting product that we, you know, ultimately have decided upon. But is there a way that the permit application and a permit application can be developed for historic property so that there is a line item that accounts for these questions that we're asking?
Let me address that. That's actually what we're looking at in terms of intent, by bifurcating the administrative process versus the special certificate of appropriateness process. And it's really getting into those particular details that we really need to have some sense of guidance from the initial application process of when someone wants to make modifications to a particular structure is this, that they would know from the onset that there are certain expectations to do it from an administrative standpoint. If they want to do it not from an administrative standpoint, which would in essence bring it before you, that we would have to have the necessary details of what their full intent is, getting into the details of how the doors are being designed, whether it's a wood frame door, and if it's a solid wood door, there are some differences in prices as it relates to solid wood doors, especially if it's an arch wood door versus buying just a regular door from one of our hardware stores that sells them. those are the things that we really need to have pointed out, so that we can basically have a listing or a litany of what is expected as it relates to going through an administrative process or going through a full review process, which is what this particular application is going through at this time. So those are some of the things that we're going to be delineating those things out. We're going to bring that back before you and make sure that you're comfortable with the listing that we provide in order for it to go through an administrative process.
I'd like to add a couple things, and those points are small and quick. There is not something in place now that addresses your concerns. Most times when people come in for a permit, it is a basic permit application. It does not include anything extra one way or another. In zoning review, we see the properties that are historic, pull them out of the group, and then address the property owner and let them know what other things may be needed. What Mr. Gay has suggested might be the better way of dealing with this, that we have the litany of all the requirements, concerns, standards, and so on and so forth, so that we can give that as a package thing to them with this general application, but making sure that they provide the extra detail and information so that it can be something that would fit the requirements of the historic board, but also would enhance the historic property that needs to be maintained in a certain level.
Question for you.
Yes, sir.
What are your thoughts about when we have a historic application, that there be a pre-application meeting? So in other words, either one of the board members, if we're available, we can sit in, and then that can be kind of like that initial step saying, hey, what are you trying to do? Here's some things that we've occurred. Here's some suggestions. And then that pre-application meeting is, because right now there is no pre-application meeting
There
requirement,
is.
correct?
No.
So to me, that pre-application meeting is our opportunity, or the city's opportunity, to say, hey, let us see what you're doing. Here's some guidance as you're doing it, so that they don't have to back up. Or when they get to this particular stage, they would have been at least coached, or they would have had enough information to put them on the right track.
Agreed.
It's food for thought.
Mhm.
But I'm gonna keep on messing with you. As it relates to photos, there's one front photo. They got to give us more photos. So give me front, side, back, top, round, area, whatever, something that we can, because right now we're approving with conditions, but we don't know what the side looks like. We have nothing to document it.
Okay.
And even if this particular, let's just say, God forbid, something happened and this a tornado comes and tears this house up tomorrow, we don't have anything to document it from a photography standpoint. Just food for thought.
That's fine.
I'm not beating up on you. It's all good.
It's okay.
We would definitely take that in consideration, especially for this particular property, because it's actually a corner lot. So it's actually has two views from the public right away.
Yeah, definitely.
It's also likely a flip because they've been doing work on this house that's been unpermitted for months, being that I live near around it. So I'm just, we just need to move along here, but short of having an application similar to people choosing a paint color, I think it needs to be no different for windows and doors, and being very suggestive about that and what that looks like. But I love your suggestion about, I don't want to call it an intervention, but basically the pre-consultation, because this is all about community relations and education for these people. Either someone that's buying it to flip it, and they're literally selling it right now. So that's why I'm not talking out of turn. I know what they're doing here, but even for those that end up acquiring it, or others that live in their primary and want the best for their home, but maybe not know exactly what that looks like, that's what we're here to do. So I don't know if we need to send you guys individually our suggestions as to what that might look like, as far as a paint color code type of document that at least helps to shepherd them from an initial phase as an early win, or if we can step into this arena that he's talking about and offer ourselves, we can rotate as needed and be at your service and make that connection. But we should be a resource. Unlike a lot of these boards, we should have it be our priority to be a resource to historic homeowners, both current and future. And I think we need to cultivate that conversation a lot more aggressively so that we're not making poor choices. So,
Well, individually, I think it's important that we get the standards that are going to be required to make the historic property a better historic representation. And that's the first priority. So that if we have the submittal meetings, we can tell them what those requirements are. And we can do paint at the end, and we can have a meeting of any other sort later, but the first part of the requirements needs to be given to the property owner so that they know exactly what they're facing. And so they can present something that's approvable.
Question. So obviously, when they replace these windows, they're gonna have to paint because they're gonna patch through stucco and concrete. But then at what point is the building department giving approval of paint colors?
They have to submit a permit
Are
and be
they,
approved for the paint colors that
are they,
is in the city's code.
but are we boldly advising them, hey, paint colors must be approved by the building department?
Yes,
Does the average person know that?
when they come in, yes.
And that goes for
They're
every
told.
property in the city of Opa-locka right now.
Yeah, they're told,
Say that again.
That goes for every property in the city of Opa-locka.
not just historic.
So question for you, is it too much to ask that when this particular permit is issued, that there's a standard memo that just goes in front, hey, please be advised that prior to painting, a painting permit must be pulled and colors approved? Like just a standard permit that goes with it, goes with the permit application, is out the door. Because obviously what happens is people tend to, hey, I'm trying to either flip this house or I'm trying to complete a renovation. They're not thinking of, oh yeah, I gotta go back and get a painting permit.
I agree.
Strike while the iron's hot.
I agree. And what I'm gonna say is just simply this. The pre-meeting that we were talking about, pre-submission, all of that information can be disseminated at that time. And I think that's the best way to do it. So we hit everything at once, and then they can come back if they have questions or additional concerns.
Okay,
Mhm.
fair enough.
hopefully they did the roof right, because they got a
Hopefully.
new roof. And I don't see that in the application, but nevertheless, let's see. And board members, any additional comments? No? Can I get a motion to approve?
With these conditions,
Motion approved with conditions.
with these conditions.
With the conditions stated by Board Member Brown? A motion to approve with the conditions stated by Board Member Brown and recorded by Mr. Lee.
I second.
Did
Or I make the motion.
I got a motion from Board Member Brown. I need a second.
Second.
Second by Board Member Hernandez. Madam Clerk, roll call.
Board Member McIntyre. Board Member Hernandez.
Yes.
Board Member Brown.
Yes.
Vice Chairman Beckle.
Sure, yes.
Thank you.
It's the
Approved.
best I can give.
I'd just like to mention something that I brought up maybe at least a year ago. And that's the concept of getting a professional group like Plus Serbia to do the guidelines for all of this. And they put together a really good document that answers all of your questions on what's appropriate. Unfortunately, it costs money to get that study done, but I firmly believe it's worth every cent. So I'd like some consideration to be given to that. If you'd like a proposal from Plus Serbia, I'm sure they'll be glad to do it. I've already spoken to them about it. We're talking about roughly 25,000. So if you like, I'll get them to send you a proposal. They'd like to do it.
Board Member McIntyre, that's we've heard your suggestion once before, and we tried to incorporate that as a part of our budget for this particular board. We're still working that angle to best suit what the board is desiring and actually how the city should be operating in relationship to this particular process. So we're going to continue to push that envelope. We had some difficulties over the last few months and the way things were being done administratively. We've had some changes now, so I'm hoping that things will be a little bit more on the positive side in order to get that accomplished. So we are looking to do that. And it's not just for having some guidelines. We're also looking at expenditures as it relates to the plaques for the historic properties. We definitely want to get that included within our budget so that we can go ahead and have it designed, have it made, and then be able to have some type of event where we'll be saluting our historic properties. So we're looking forward in the next few months to be able to bring that accomplishment to you all.
Question for you. As far as the budgeting for that particular study, do we, like, for example, I guess, how do you budget for it? Because what happens is, as you know, whatever fees would have been a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, it's totally different in 2025, 2026. So is it worth just as a footnote to get a quote for the effort?
We would normally go through that process anyway to just kind of make sure that we're in the ballpark as it relates to those particular costs.
Or is it a
If
situation you gotta get
if it's
multiple?
under a certain amount, we may be able to get it approved administratively, but it still has to be appropriated within our budget. But if it goes beyond 25,000, then we'll have to go through an RFP process in order to have
Multiple.
someone selected in order to do that particular study.
Got it. Okay.
We'll come back on the topic of budget for board comments or this discussion, but I'd like to go ahead and proceed with discussions and presentations per the agenda regarding HEP rules, regulations, and board reconfiguration.
Okay. First thing, and I believe we may have we presented you all with some drafts of what we're looking to do. As it relates to the board operation itself, we're looking to change the makeup of the board from a 7-member board that it stands right now to a 5-member board with alternates in order for us to be able to achieve quorum status for our meetings. We're looking to change the scheduling of our meetings. Based on the memorandum between Miami-Dade County and the city of Opa-locka, we're only required to have 4 board meetings a year. We're looking to increase that number to 6, so that at least that we will be meeting on a bi-monthly basis. So we're going to be moving that particular thing forward. As far as the requirements for board membership, we're looking to modify that as well in order for people to be qualified to be on the board. As it stands right now, we have, I believe it's 2 professional slots out of the 7 slots that are available. And the rest are supposed to be residents. As we change the makeup of the board, we're looking at modifying those numbers as well. So the professional number may remain at 2, or it may go down to 1. We still feel that having a professional on the board is important in order to keep everybody informed as to what the standards are and what some of the design criteria that need to be considered as it relates to historic properties. So we're looking to bring that information back to you. It will most likely be in January of 2025 that we present this information. Once we present it to you, we do have to present it to the city commission. for their approval. And then from there, we will, for lack of a better phrase, pretty much start out with a new board. Your positions may have to go through a reappointment process. Um, Considering that we do have a few board members whose memberships have expired, um, we need to get everything shored back up as it relates to this particular board. So we're going to be providing this information to you most likely before that January meeting. So if you have comments in relationship to it, you can respond back to us, and we can make sure that we get closer to a final document that we can present to you all, have you adopt it in concept, and then take it before the commission for their approval. Any
It's really
questions?
helpful. We could get it before the meeting so that we have a chance to read it thoroughly.
Yes, ma'am. Any other questions?
If I'm understanding, this is our third meeting in 2024, correct? If I'm not mistaken.
I'm not sure the number count.
Basically,
Maybe
what
our
I'm
third
concerned
meeting,
about,
yes.
I'd heard at the top of the meeting, a comment made about reconvening in January. And if our minimum standard is 4, then we're shy of one additional meeting before the end of the year. Per
The-
county.
Actually, the calendar year does not go, is not how we're measured.
October to October.
It's October to October.
Okay. Okay. Um,
September to October.
okay. Good to know. Board members, any comments or in this particular regard? Is attendance part of this rules? Because I know that there's been an issue with that for current standing members, and I don't know why there's a standard of the city commission to uphold attendance, but there isn't for a board. I thought there was a blanket ordinance or, something in the charter that addresses that for board members, but at this point, I feel like we're, pushing the can down here because, there's clearly an issue with this commitment.
Within the new information, attendance will play a role.
So currently in the chart, there's nothing that addresses attendance for board members holding their positions and appointments.
I remember there being something about attendance.
There is a reference, but I think it's if you
Miss.
if you
consecutive.
miss a certain amount of meetings consistently, that's usually how it is being handled. But we want to be able to add more teeth to that.
Okay.
I think, yeah, because I think it was, you're saying consistently, I think it says consecutive or something like that.
Yes.
So if a
Okay.
person misses, or in other words, and again, I'm going off of memory, please don't hold me to this. But if a person makes one particular meeting a year, they still may be on the board.
I see. Okay. So
So
pay
it's-
closer attention to that. All right. The next part of this, I know you've been alluding to it. Is there anything else in addition to a matrix admin versus HEP approval and certificate of appropriateness process?
Yes. As been discussed with some of the other items, we definitely need to look at an opportunity to bifurcate our process as it relates to an administrative certificate of appropriateness versus a special certificate of appropriateness. As it stands right now, everything goes through a special certificate of appropriateness where it's being brought before your board for consideration and input. There are certain aspects of improvements to historic properties that may not necessarily need to go through the same type of review process. For example, we had one tonight where just the roof is being replaced. Even though there were some points that were brought up as a part of the discussion, that might be something that can be more suitably handled in-house or within the department. and through the city administration to get those particular items addressed. Now, as it relates to some things that might be a little bit more detailed, and especially when we're talking about windows and doors, not every window is alike, not every door is alike, like, and there are certain details that need to be maintained, especially for historic structures, that the replacement windows or the replacement doors resemble um, the historic fabric or the historic significance of the structure itself. We don't want to put colonial windows into something that had a different style of window at that time, whether it be jalousie or whether it be casement windows or a particular type of door. It might have been an all solid wood door versus the new doors that are available now. So we want to be able to create that list and basically go down and present it to you and have an opportunity to say, these are good to go through an administrative review process, and anything that is beyond that will have to come before the board. And if you're installing a dome, I'm pretty sure those are going to have to come before you guys.
So as it relates to the first agenda item that we addressed as it relates to the re-roof. So the intake on the permit application was September 19th, right? We're in obviously November. So 2 months later, they're getting approval. And the question is that an appropriate time? Because I'm gonna be honest, if we were going to city of Miami, it's a lot of bureaucracy to get approval. I think that 2 months would be almost like the maximum amount of time that a person needs to wait to get a re-roof or a roofing permit. But we also don't want it to be where, I guess this is a standard re-roof and not an emergency re-roof. Is there any type of procedures if there's an emergency re-roof that we can assist them with helping that circumstances?
Usually under emergency circumstances, the property owner is given the wherewithal to solve or resolve the issue. And for historic properties, it's usually something that is done after the fact.
Got it. Okay, fair enough.
All right, any comments about this proposed matrix? It'd be great to just reference what the county's already provided us, just as a roadmap. I know we've brought it up about a year ago, but that's a great resource to be able to just not necessarily replicate, to certainly reference it for our purposes. So yes,
We've had some conversations, and we do have an annual meeting with Miss Cody in relationship to those particular guidelines, and we had to present a report to them on an annual basis as well.
great. You brought up, it's not on the discussion, but while we're on the topic, and we can go ahead to board comments, but in regards to budgets, and I know that we were very proudly responsible for registering our first historic property in over 3 decades, that being Board Member Hernandez's home, the Hurt House. But the larger question becomes, has there been a more or less any kind of an amount established in a budget simply to afford us plaques that can start in the first quarter of the next year? I mean, essentially, it'd be nice to start establishing some goals with reasonable deadlines for us to achieve these things, because that resolution was passed by the city commission in June. And there's been opportunities to seek either grants or private funding sources to essentially afford this one opportunity that chance. If there needs to be an expanded discussion during budget season about this for the long term, that's one thing. But I'm just trying to seek some immediate solutions. 2025 is the last year before we get into our centennial year, and it'd be nice to know what resources we have or what's being worked on. And in the event that nothing's being carved out from that budget, where else can we source funding? And I, give a shout out to Board Member McIntyre, who not just represents and is heavily involved with the villagers, nonprofit, the preservation arm for the county, but she was willing to extend herself to establish and craft an entire grant program that would have gifted us money to be able to pay for this. So without knowing what is not able to be done within 2025 versus what we independently can be pursuant of to help this program move forward, short of us all agreeing on what this plaque should look like in 2025 and on, that should be a unanimous decision. But the funding sources, there are multiple ways in which we can identify that. We just have not heard as to what's realistic by a certain time.
To best answer your question or your statement, we have, and when I say we, it's the city administration. We have looked into applying for certain grant funding opportunities. We did look at a particular grant with the villagers. There were some questions as to whether the municipality would be able to apply for that particular grant or whether it had to be a property owner themselves apply for it. So while we were trying to figure that particular thing out, I think the timeline for that application came and went. So we did not move forward with that. I'd like to have a sidebar discussion with you, Board Member McIntyre, to see how we can better work with the villagers or any other grant opportunities that may exist out there. And to see what are the specific requirements, whether a municipality can participate or not, because that was one of the questions that was raised when we looked at the villagers grant, and it basically looked like it had to be something that had to be done by the property owner themselves versus the city of Opa-locka. So if we have to do it from that perspective, maybe we can circle around and do it where we count up all 30 properties that we have that are already designated, and maybe through an outside organization be able to make that application move forward.
Can we proceed with designing the plaque so we can get
Yes,
quotes on the plaque?
Absolutely. And Mr. Bancoli has been looking at opportunities where we can have a plaque design forward to you all. We'll do that over the holiday months so that we can get your input to see whether you may like this particular design or another particular design. We've pretty much come to the conclusion that it needs to be a very substantial material, either a metal plaque or a ceramic plaque. There was a suggestion of possibly wood, but I don't think wood would be suitable. So we're going to finalize those particular things. And next month, we're going to be forwarding that information to you all for your input.
I know it's a little expensive.
$450. That's all it cost for for a lasting impact.
Yes.
And as
Got it.
far as the plaque verbiage is concerned, I've already shared that with staff, so I'd like for the board to receive it. I had not sent it to the entire group as some suggestions, and I took it upon myself to find resources that produce this professionally and help guide that process. So the suggestions that are in there come from experts that, chimed in as far as our aesthetic and capturing kind of the gold standard for what you would want to see in a historic plaque. Because the ones that are still on existing landmarks, like my house, for example, that was a replication of the National Park Service, both in type as well as structure and the words themselves. So I think it's worth making ours a little bit more distinct, since that's very fitting for our motif. Okay. The last thing I'd like to hear about, and I think we're all eager to hear about where it's at, is the Moorish Home Grant Program. Given that this is now 2 years in, and this item had been produced and approved by the city commission, but short of not hearing anything of where it currently stands as a group, but also that the commitment of 10 North Group matching that $100,000 with the understanding that there would be a schedule and a work against date to actually achieve this in 2025. It'd be great to get some kind of a status update.
Okay, I'm going to have Mr. Saul Bancoli, who has been championing this particular process, come up and give you a brief presentation. Well, and while he comes up, um, we have had some hiccups along the way. Um, we did go through a evaluation process that, based on the funding sources that we're looking at utilizing, um, it was determined that the evaluation needed to be redone. So I'm gonna have him come up and talk about those particular items. We're trying to move it as quickly as possible. We initially it was going to be funded through within the city budget, but then an opportunity came along where we can use the American Cares Act funding in order to assist in funding the improvements for the property. So Mr. McCauley will give you a brief presentation.
Board Vice Chair, members of the board. For the record, my name is Saul Bancole with Economic and Community Development under the auspices of Director Gay of Planning, Zoning, and Community Development for the city of Opa-locka. With regards to the grant, as you guys are aware, we've had a change in the management or executive side, and the staff already secured the loan, the grant approved for recipients or applicants. But it was determined that the process was not constitutional, so we have to go back and re-proffer process for review that's currently being, undertaken by the new interim city manager. So I'm not sure if we'll be able to complete the process before the year ends, but we promise to come back at the first quarter of the next year, 2025, to update on where we are. If we need to go back and repeat, on the application side and giving other homeowners, historic homeowners, the opportunity to reapply, we can do that. But that will be a decision that has to be made within the executive branch of the city of Opa-locka. That's where we are.
Is there anything specifically about that constitutional process that you could share was not followed?
Well, based on the current DRC, Development Review Committee, you have to have other department heads as part of the review members. Well, we did not do that. It was only within the PCD.
So is this a procedural issue or a funding issue or both?
No, there's no funding issue. The funding is still secured.
Okay.
Yes, the procedure issue, yes.
Let me just further express that when we initially started this process, it was going to be funded through the city budget. And that particular review process would have been suitable based on that particular funding. When the administration changed and decided that they were going to utilize federal funding, that changed the criteria of the review process. So in essence, the people who were involved with the initial review, we needed to have a broader spectrum of professionals involved in the review process, which we did not do when it was going to be funded just by the city. So because of that aspect being changed, we had to basically do it again. Now, we did receive 6 applications from different property owners. Out of the 6, I believe 4 actually qualified. So we were ready to move forward with those 4. We just got to change our review process, have those same 4 applications reevaluated, give a recommendation to the city manager so that we can move forward with the allocations. Because we're using federal funds, we've already done a memorandum of understanding within the city manager's office so that we would not be in jeopardy of losing that funding source from the federal government.
And what is the funding source?
It's the American Cares
Yeah, it's APA fund.
APA funds.
So as I understand, ARPA was voted on by the community for specific purposes, but historic homes didn't end up initially making the cut, even if it was presented initially. So what ended up happening with the four other projects that were voted on and money was encumbered for those projects?
The monies have not been encumbered.
So they've not been essentially assigned to the projects that they were supposed to be for, and
Not
now
yet.
they're being redirected.
They have not been assigned as of yet.
And at what point do they need to be committed to afford them being rolled over into next year, even if that's even a thing? Does the
With-
money get rolled over
With
into?
the memorandum of understanding within the city administration, that gives us an opportunity to extend the timeline
To 2026.
for the funding to be utilized.
For ARPA funds?
Yes.
Okay.
And we've already done that. So that part has already been taken care of. It's just a matter of changing the makeup of the review committee so that we can do the review again. The results are most likely, hopefully going to be the same as what was presented before, since all of the applicants did qualify. We have room for additional applications to be made. So we have, in essence, extended the timeline and the opportunity for additional properties. And we're talking of the six, that leaves another 20 that could potentially apply for improvements as well.
So do the homeowners have to reapply? Is this being basically revamped in its entirety from the application and outreach process to the review, or are you working with what's already been submitted?
We're working with what has been submitted thus far, but the door is still open for other homeowners and property owners to apply.
And how's that being communicated?
We're going to basically have to bring that information back out once again, because I think we had initially set a deadline of November 30th, if my memory serves me correct. We're going to be extending that with a notification saying, hey, this application is still open, it's still available for any of you who reside within these historic properties. Please come and apply.
Okay. And there's no understanding as to when this can start a deployment of some sort realistically?
We're looking at deploying at least the first 4 as soon as we get approval from the city manager.
And that could happen
Anytime.
more or less at the beginning of next year? Is that kind of
We're
our target?
hoping by January 1st, we would have resolved all those things.
Okay. I really appreciate the updates. I think my inquiries simply are pegged to my representation and alignment with the 10 North Group and this grant match. I mean, this is an important $100,000 that's on the table to be able to enhance the outreach of how this is done. And contingent on a schedule being provided and a commitment, that MOU giving evidence that there are funds still secured to allow this program and this project to see the light of day. That is my sole interest in making this happen. It's so that the homeowners reap the benefit, but we also have a partner in this community that's willing to give this money so that this has a larger impact than just 4 homes. It would be a maximum of 8 of those additional 20 potentially that could be served this opportunity. So all I ask is for communication to be provided to this board and for any information to be provided so that we on the 10 North End can help craft that on our side so that not only is it budgeted for, but there's a program in place to also administer it in whatever way it needs to be that follows and is consistent with what you guys have established. From the application process and the review to the actual implementation, including the selection of the contractors, which I don't know if you can share anything about that because the legislation stated that the homeowner would have 3 contractors to choose from. I don't know if those 3 have been chosen.
Those are also being reevaluated by the city manager.
Okay, perfect. Board members, any additional final comments before we say goodbye? I couldn't come up with the word adjournment. All right. Well, thank you, staff, again, for the presentations, for all the updates and information. We look forward to receiving more about the grant program, as well as the matrix, as well as the plaque text. And board members, I encourage you to reach out to our staff here with any suggestions or ideas in helping us create a roadmap for 2025, which inevitably leads into our centennial 2026. Without further ado, can I get a motion to adjourn? Moved by Board Member McIntyre. Second by Board Member Brown. Thank you very much. Good night, everyone.
Thank you.